Day one of the school holidays, and in the massive fast food grottos of shopping centres, the eating business is booming. There's no need to sensationalise about Australia's fat children. The bodies in the mall and the food going into them speak volumes. We're now told at least 1 in 4 children is overweight or worse, obese.
Our children are progressively becoming fatter and fatter and fatter. I can't think of a single aspect of our lives, from the moment we wake up till the moment we go back to bed, that isn't pushing us towards greater and greater obesity.
When you've got a 2-year-old sitting in the back seat of the car and they can spot the M sign like 500 metres down the street and then have a tantrum in the back seat when you drive past, I think it must do something.
Toxic, pathological and obesogenic is how researchers describe the world where children now grow up. The change has happened in just 20 years. And once you're fat, the real horror begins.
Bullying, stigmatisation, teasing. They can have high blood pressure, high cholesterol. They can have insulin resistance, a risk factor for diabetes ultimately in the future. Asthma, obstructive sleep apnea, fatty liver disease.
The insidious kilos being packed onto kids is a multi-billion-dollar crisis that no one but the health sector wants to face up to. Not federal leaders and not the industry feeders.
If their parents are foolish enough to feed their kids on a diet of Coca-Cola and lollies, well, they should lift their game and lift it urgently.
We can't tell people what to put in their mouths. We can give them a lot of choice about healthy choices.
Tonight on Four Corners, the generation that forgot to stop eating and get off its behind, and the powerful forces who blame everyone but the food industry.
So how was school today, Tim?
It was alright.
It's all right?
It's Friday afternoon, and for 14-year-old Tim Martell-Rose, the bodywork is just beginning. After school tennis, it's off to boxing to sweat off a few kilos. Just 6 months ago, Tim was 1.65 metres tall and weighed in at almost 100 kilos. He's now shot up to 1.78 metres and his waistline is shrinking. But the fight, mental and physical, has been brutal.
How did you feel when you were bigger?
I didn't like myself. Everyone was teasing me.
Were they?
Yeah.
It's very hard to hear your child come home from school, very depressed, not wanting to go to school, not having friends, being bullied.
What's the most hurtful thing that a friend has said to you?
I don't want to be your friend because you're fat.
Let's go. Start off with 2s, eh? Let's go. 1, 2. Come on, 1, 2.
There was an incident at school where he was held by 5 children while one punched him in the face.
Come on.
He had advantage at me because there was lots of people holding me back. So he had advantage and he's been teasing me for a couple of years.
About being heavy?
Yeah.
8 seconds.
Surveys have actually found that children would rather say that they are good friends with someone with a very obvious disability than with a fat child.
You've been pushing yourself today, mate, but you've got to push yourself more and more every week. You want to lose that weight? We've got to work harder and harder every week, all right?
Yeah.
Boy.
Tough as it is, Tim knows exercise is the easy part.
What's the temperature, Al?
The real battle is with food.
Come on, under you go.
I reckon I would have been smaller, but if I hadn't keep eating as much, if I hadn't kept eating all junk food.
So you blame yourself for that, do you?
Yeah.
His older brothers and his younger sister, we have to try and put weight on with him. They don't eat enough. They're underweight They're trying to put on weight.
So how do you balance that as a parent?
Oh, you're the wicked witch. you can't do the right thing. You're turning around telling the other kids to eat more and telling Tim to, that's enough mate, just wait, or have some fruit, where the other two can eat whatever they like.
What, you got little athletics now?
Yeah, I'm buggered already.
Little athletics depends on loyal support of parents willing to give up Friday nights and man the sandpit.
14 boys and girls will be travelling with the 15s tonight, so if you can join them at long jump. 14 boys and girls will be travelling.
He does not do all the events because he can't do long distance running, he can't do the hurdles, he feels bad if he comes last, he falls over the hurdles, can't do high jump. So Tim will walk around, do his throws, and he'll eat. Behind your back, he'll eat.
No, run. You can't do it. Good boy.
Most big teenagers like Tim Martell-Rose never make it to little athletics. There are now 1.5 million overweight kids in Australia.
Big improvement, Tim.
Between the mid-1980s and mid-1990s, the number of overweight children doubled and the more serious category, obese children, tripled. And the latest data on 10-year-olds should shock parents.
New South Wales has just conducted the largest survey in Australia since 1997, and it's going to show us that children, about 30% of them are overweight or obese.
Australian children are amongst the heaviest in the world and now on a par with the US. Overweight and obese Australians now cause an estimated 7% of the nation's entire disease burden, second only to smoking at 12%.
Now, if the hazards of being obese and overweight are as extreme as they look to be currently, and this is among populations who haven't been obese or overweight as a child, then we're likely to have even more extreme hazards, and that may well lead to obesity being as important as something like tobacco.
Professor Louise Bauer has been working on childhood obesity for 10 years. Her patients are as young as 2.
Those who are severely obese have skin folds, they can have thrush or other unpleasant skin disorders as a result of that. Some of our younger kids who are very obese are also so large that they find it difficult to actually self-toilet themselves, and so they may need help from their parents when they've gone to the toilet.
So how can they manage at school?
Well, this can be very, very difficult.
Today, an obese adolescent has an 80% chance of becoming an obese adult. With obesity comes the very real threat of diabetes. The body fails to use its insulin to control blood sugar levels.
Can you go on a sugar binge?
No. He'll be unconscious.
A former nurse and now Cheeky the Clown performer, Chris Russell has paid a high price for putting on weight early in life. Thyroid problems made her put on even more, and she now lives with diabetes. For the last 10 years, her life has been sabotaged.
I had a mild palsy stroke thing where I had to get over that. I've had all troubles with infertility, and we didn't, my husband, John and I, we didn't have any children, so...
All these problems relate to what's known as diabesity, and while there's laughter on the outside, Chris Russell knows that there are even bigger risks ahead of her.
I mean, cancer, for one. It's just the big killer these days, let alone diabetes on top of that, with heart disease, everything. So I think,
And is this all due to being overweight?
Oh, absolutely. Weight.
This type 2 diabetes is one of the world's most preventable diseases. It used to be called adult onset diabetes, but doctors have stopped calling it that now.
It's one thing for it to start when you're 50. It's an entirely different matter for it to start when you're 15 or 20.
What happens?
Well, it means that probably by the time you're in your 40s, you will have had an amputation, you will be going blind or will already be blind, you'll be staring down the barrel of heart disease, kidney failure, and you'd probably be lucky to live beyond 50.
Dr. Michael Booth at Sydney University has done some of the latest work on overweight children. 500 blood samples were taken from 15-year-olds.